Christmas on Sodor. Written and told by Kiefer Adams. Christmas was not far away on the island of Sodor, but the snow was late arriving. That evening, the Fat Controller came to Tidmouth Sheds. "A heavy snowfall is expected tomorrow," he said. "I would like you all to make your ways to the yard and get your snowploughs fitted." "Yes, sir," chorused the engines. The Fat Controller then left, bidding good night to the engines as he did. "I knew this would come sooner or later," sighed Gordon. "It's just like every year," said Henry. "We have to wear our snowploughs and be safe." "Och, I just hope it's not going to cause us any trouble," said Emily. "It always causes us trouble," grumbled James. "The snow is so difficult to plough, you need 3 tractors to get you out of it." "Well, it's not all that bad, is it?" said Percy. "After all, there's a few weeks until Christmas." "Percy's right," agreed Edward. "We just got to work hard and get things ready for the festive season." The engines chattered all night about the snow, but Thomas was worried. He wondered if they would even get through the snow this year. But luckily, the Fat Controller had called on a new friend to help them out. The next morning, the engines all woke up to the sight of snow spread across the ground. It wasn't as heavy to begin with, but there would be more to come. Toby had been working in the early hours of the morning, delivering coal to the villagers on his tramway. He was just making his way back when a loud horn, and one that he didn't recognise, almost made him jump. "Excuse me, mate," called a voice as Toby looked to his right. Sure enough, before him was the strangest vehicle he had ever seen. It looked like a van, but Toby was quick to notice that instead of wheels, it had 4 separate caterpillar tracks. "Oh, hello," said Toby. "Who are you?" "Name's Vince, mate," replied the vehicle. "Well, I can see you've come to help us for the Christmas holidays," said Toby. "What exactly are you?" "I'm a snowmobile," replied Vince. "I've come to help Terence and clear the roads." "Well, it's good to have you here, Vince," said Toby. "Safe travels." "Here, thank you, mate," smiled Vince, and he rolled quickly away. Toby didn't quite know what to make of Vince as he continued on his way. A little later, Toby dropped off some supplies at Dryall Station. At that moment, Thomas passed through, on his way to get his snowplough fitted. Toby was quick to tell him all about Vince. "I saw him earlier," said Thomas. "He's quite the machine, isn't he?" "But I don't see how he can help us." "Terence might show him a thing or two," reassured Toby. "But I am quite concerned about the weather. Driver says we're getting more snow this afternoon." "Yes, so I've heard," said Thomas. "Toby," Thomas added, "are you worried about the build-up to Christmas?" "A little bit," Toby admitted, "but we got to do what we can, Thomas. The Fat Controller is relying on us all to get our jobs done so everyone can celebrate Christmas together." Thomas felt very reassured of this. "Right, I best be going," he said. "I've got to get my snowplough fitted." "Take it easy," said Toby, "and remember, be prepared this afternoon." Thomas promised that he would, and the 2 engines parted ways. Terence was as good as his word when it came to Vince. He showed the snowmobile everything that needed to be done. I hate to be rude, Terence," Vince was saying, "but you wouldn't exactly see me with a snowplough." "Oh, don't worry about that," said Terence. "You leave that to me. Your job is to make sure all the roads are safe." "Oh, well, that's all right then," said Vince. "But what if an engine gets stuck in a drift? Do I have to help them too?" "Not fully," said Terence. "Just give them some words of encouragement. And if they're truly stuck, just come for me. I'll get them out of a drift." I even got Thomas out once. How did that work for you? Quite easy, actually. I moved his coaches first, then I came back for Thomas. Caw, you must have been quite a strong tractor to move an engine, said Vince, sounding quite impressed. Well, I don't like to brag, said Terence. Stop gossiping, Terence, said Farmer Finney. We've still got to show Vince around. Oh, yes, of course. Come on, Vince. I'll show you the country road. The snow's quite tricky there. Right behind you, Terence, called Vince. But all the while, Terence couldn't resist continuing his story of how he rescued Thomas from a snowdrift. Meanwhile, Diesel was seething with rage. The Fat Controller had asked him, of all engines, to wear a snowplough. He sat crossly at the works as he went to have it fitted. His snowplough was a lot different to the other engines. It was a thinner blade, but was yellow and black striped and hung under his buffer beam. What kind of sick joke is this to call a snowplough? He oiled grumpily. The workman had just put on the last bolt of the snowplough when Henry came in. Oh, Diesel, he gasped. Thank goodness I found you. I've been trying to find someone for ages. What is it? Diesel scowled. Thomas got his snowplough fitted, but he's gotten stuck in a large drift. He was clearing the track to his branch line, but the snow buried his plough in. Can you go and help him? You've got a snowplough. And what's in it for me if I go? Asked Diesel. You'll be the most useful engine of all, reassured Henry. Diesel was quite reluctant at first, but he knew that a stuck engine was not something to ignore. Once his plough had had its checks, he revved his engine and set off to find Thomas, muttering under his breath as he did. By this point, the snowfall that Toby had informed Thomas about had arrived. It came down hard and fast and made things difficult for Diesel. He growled as he put his new snowplough to work. This is why diesels don't work in the snow, he roared as he forced the plough into the snow. At that moment, a voice called out to him. Come on, mate, you can do it. Diesel looked over and saw Vince watching the operation. What on earth are you supposed to be? He oiled. Never mind that, encouraged Vince. I've seen that Thomas just down the line. You can do it. You're not too far away. I think you got this. You're quite strong for your class. Diesel liked the sound of that. He pushed hard into the snow. His engine roared, and he was determined to get through. Vince allowed him to pass and watched with admiration as Diesel forced the snow aside, gritting his teeth and concentrating as hard as he could. Yeah, he's got this big time, Vince said to himself. Thomas's driver and fireman had done what they could to dig out his snowplough, but it was still stuck. I'm never going to get out of here, said Thomas. Terence is really going to kick up a storm when he finds out about this. I wouldn't be so sure of that, oiled a voice, as Diesel, covered in snow patches around his body, appeared next to Thomas. Diesel, Thomas spluttered. Where did you come from? From Santa Claus's magical winter wonderland, snarled Diesel. Where do you think I came from? Thomas then noticed Diesel's snowplough. Did you come to my rescue with that? He exclaimed. That's quite impressive. I didn't know diesels could have snowplows. Neither did I, said Diesel plainly. Now then, let's get you out of here and back to the yard in good order. With the help of Diesel's own crew, Thomas's snowplough was soon dug free. He changed tracks and Diesel carried on the rest of the journey. He was no longer embarrassed over his new snowplough, as he felt it was quite powerful. Even Thomas had to admit, it was a very rare opportunity to be rescued by Diesel, as the two of them made their way back to the yard. A little later, Percy came along, as it was his turn to have his snowplough fitted. He was quite relieved to see Thomas having his snowplough checked over, in case there had been any dents from when it was buried. "Oh, Thomas," said Percy, "thank goodness you're safe. But how on earth did you get out of that?" "You won't believe it," said Thomas, and he quickly explained about Diesel. "It's a good thing Henry and Vince saw me," Thomas said. "They must have spread the word to Diesel. His snowplough did wonders." Percy was amazed. Soon, Thomas's snowplough had been checked out and everything was fine. "Well, got to go," Thomas said. "Don't get stuck, Percy. You wouldn't want Diesel to come and help, would you?" Percy chuckled as Thomas puffed away. But as the weeks passed and Christmas slowly made itself known, the engines realised that they didn't really need their snowploughs as often as they expected. They carried on their work regardless, aiming to please the Fat Controller in the days slowly building up to Christmas. Within a few weeks, the weather had cleared, but the snow remained. Vince was a valuable asset to the roads, and Terence taught him well. The engines were now tasked with delivering Christmas trees across the island. Thomas recently had the honour of taking the ballyhoo tree. It was large and green and majestic, and when Thomas passed by later that day, it was covered in colourful tinsel, lights and baubles. "This is going to be the best Christmas ever," puffed Thomas. The engines had also heard whispers of an old friend coming back to the island to help out with the festivities. But no one knew who it was, except the Fat Controller, who was keeping the secret to himself. It was a few days before Christmas Eve. Emily was waiting at the junction with a long line of coal trucks making her deliveries across the island. While she waited, Daisy, the diesel rail car, rolled up snootily beside her.
"Oh, isn't that the way?"
She smirked. "I beg your pardon," said Emily, rather surprised.
"You always stock up for the steam engines and the stations of the island,"
said Daisy.
"but you never do anything for us diesels."
"Of course we do," protested Emily. "Name one thing we haven't done."
"Well, you could have at least supplied the yards with freshly made fuel tanks,"
said Daisy.
"It would save a lot of bother for us to start on those horrendous cold mornings."
"But that's not my problem," said Emily. "I can't help it if your engine doesn't want to start in the morning."
"And that's another thing,"
said Daisy.
"We might have helped you build an airport earlier in the summer, but that doesn't mean you have to look down your funnels at us and think that diesels are not useful."
Before Emily could detest, Daisy rolled away.
"And another thing,"
she called as she did.
"you steam engines always show off that you have a better Christmas than us."
Emily gritted her teeth and puffed away to deliver her coal. While she delivered coal at Kelsthorpe Road, Emily told Henry what Daisy had said. Henry couldn't help but tell Edward. "Do you think what Daisy says is true?" he asked. "Of course not," replied Edward. "The diesels and the steam engines have always celebrated Christmas together. Nothing's ever different. Take the times we celebrated at Tidmouth Station." "Oh, I remember that day quite well," boomed a familiar voice. Henry and Edward almost jumped with surprise. "I know that voice," said Edward. And sure enough, who should roll next to Edward and Henry but BoCo, The Metropolitan Vickers Diesel Electric Type 2. "Oh, lads, long time no see," called BoCo. "Well, bust my buffers," exclaimed Edward. "BoCo! What a wonderful surprise!" "Does the Fat Controller know you're here?" asked Henry. "Of course he does," replied BoCo. "He spoke to my manager on the other railway and asked me to come and help with the festivities. He's also got something else planned for me, but I'll have to report to him to find out what it is. Anyway, best be going. Good to see you again, lads." And with that, BoCo rumbled away. "Well, I'll be," exclaimed Edward. "Christmas really has come early this year." BoCo was to report to the Fat Controller at Peel Station. He was overjoyed when the Class 28 rolled in. "Ah, BoCo," he said, "it's so good to see you again. I trust things are well on the other railway." "Ah, they are, sir, thank you," replied BoCo. I understand you've got a bit of a task for me." "Yes, indeed," replied the Fat Controller. "I've heard some concerns about the other diesels. I know they all worked well with the steam engines when they built the airport, but they believe they are not given a fair share of Christmas spirit. And that's why, BoCo, I've asked you to come and help. I'll be organising the usual party at Tidmouth Station, but I have something else planned for the diesels." "Of course, sir," said BoCo. "Anything to help," the Fat Controller quickly explained. Afterwards, it was BoCo's job to make many deliveries across the island. He bought a Christmas tree, decorations, presents, and took it all to the coaling plant. He was quite secretive, but he only told the steam engines with what he was doing. Gordon and James thought BoCo had gone mad, giving the diesels a Christmas that they believed the diesels did not deserve. The likes of Edward, Henry, Thomas and Percy knew that BoCo was a good-hearted diesel and would always help the Fat Controller in a time of need. Before long, everything was ready. BoCo had just watched the Christmas tree be decorated at the coaling plant when the diesels arrived. Diesel, Mavis, Harry, Bert, Salty, Daisy, and even Diesel 10 were in attendance. Diesel was still recounting how useful his snowplough had been. The others chuckled and praised him for his efforts. Then the Christmas hats were passed around and the tree was lit up. "I must say, BoCo, me hearty," said Salty, "this is a wonderful Christmas."
I must admit,
said Daisy.
"It looks perfect. I take back everything I say to the steam engines."
"Yes, indeed, BoCo," said Diesel. "You may have been away from our rails for quite some time, but at least you've given us a wonderful Christmas to remember." "Hear, hear," agreed Mavis. BoCo smiled humbly. There were plenty of games for the Diesel's crews to play. There were carols, there was a few Christmas treats, and even Diesel 10 let out his funny side by placing his Santa hat on his claw and making a little Santa Claus joke in the process. The steam engines also had a wonderful Christmas too, and they all had to admit it was truly a wonderful get-together indeed. But all too soon, Christmas came and went. The snow started to melt. Vince had worked especially hard during the winter, and Terence had been singing his praises. One day, just before it was New Year's Eve, Vince spotted Thomas at the junction. "Well, Thomas," he said, "I've come to say goodbye." "You've been a valuable asset to our island, Vince," said Thomas. "How can we ever thank you?" "Oh, it's nothing really. Just the snowmobile doing his duties," smiled Vince. "Take care of yourselves, won't you? And maybe I might come round next year." "We'll look forward to it," said Thomas. And And with that, Vince, the snowmobile, left for home. Thomas headed back to the warm comforts of Tidmouth Sheds. He had to admit, everyone had a very good Christmas this year. The Diesels had, thanks to BoCo, the roads had, thanks to Vince, and the Fat Controller was incredibly proud of everyone's efforts. The engines were also sorry that BoCo couldn't stay for New Year's Eve, but they were glad to have their old friend back again. It just goes to show that sometimes during the winter holidays, everyone can come together and celebrate what they love and enjoy most. And that's exactly what the engines did, all together on the island of Sodor.